Usually a map is a guarantee of a finished world. Like, the blue lines represent rivers that actually flow, and the black dots are cities with real buildings.
Right, it's a representation of something that's already there.
Exactly. But today's deep dive is about a completely unconventional source that just flips that entire concept upside down. Our mission today is to decode a fascinating piece of writing called the index.txt by Max and Claude.
And the premise alone is, honestly, it's enough to give you vertigo.
Oh, absolutely. Because this source material, well, it's the complete text of a book, but it consists entirely of an index for a book that does not actually exist.
Which is just wild to wrap your head around.
It really is. We are going to navigate through the influences of thinkers like Vladimir Nabokov and Jorge Luis Borges, and we'll be exploring the nature of memory, the physical weight of absence, and the limits of human language.
It's a huge undertaking.
Yeah. And the opening note of the text perfectly sets the hook for what you are about to experience. It says, "The book you are holding contains only this. The book this indexes contains everything else. Both statements are true. Neither requires your belief."
That's just such a powerful opening.
Okay, let's unpack this. Reading this source is exactly like unfolding a map where the roads only appear because you are actively looking at them.
Mm-hmm.
It's a guide to a territory that only springs into existence once you start walking on it. You aren't navigating a world, you are generating it.
And that fundamental shift, it completely challenges our deepest assumptions about what reading actually is. We are so conditioned to view reading as this passive reception.
Right, like sitting back and watching a movie.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
The author is the architect who builds the house, and we, as readers, we just simply wander through the pre-decorated rooms. But the index.txt isn't just a clever literary parlor trick.
Right.
It's an active psychological experiment on your consciousness. It removes the house entirely and just hands you a list of building materials.
Which immediately creates a massive logical problem.
Oh, for sure.
If there is no house, if there is no actual book attached to this index, who is the architect? I keep, scanning the source material for some kind of author bio or explanation, but the index just flips the whole concept of creation on its head.
Well, the glossary section actually addresses this head-on. If you look up the word author, it doesn't define it as a person sitting at a typewriter.
Wait, really?
Yeah, it defines author as the function that the book requires. The book needs an author to exist, therefore the function must be fulfilled.
Wait, I was so confused by this part. I actually went into the alphabetical index itself to see if the author was listed by name.
Oh, I bet I know what you found.
Yeah, between the letters M and O, there's an entry for author, but the page numbers just say not found. Is that just a formatting joke? Or is it implying the book somehow wrote itself?
It's not a joke at all. The author is not found in the text because the author is outside the text. The author is the person reading it. It's you.
Oh, wow.
The source draws heavily on the Argentine writer Jorge Luis Borges here, specifically his concept of the infinite library. Borges played with this philosophical idea that a catalog is not just a list of things. A catalog is a metaphysics.
Meaning, like, the way we organize things matters.
Exactly. The way we organize knowledge actually dictates what that knowledge is. If you organize a library by color, your understanding of literature fundamentally changes compared to organizing it by genre. And this index is the ultimate catalog.
That makes a lot of sense.
The text also introduces this brilliant concept of the aperture. It suggests that the human self is not a Tupperware container where consciousness and memories are stored up and kept safe.
Right, not just a box of files.
No, rather, the self is an opening, an aperture, like a camera lens. Experience, and in this case, reading, passes through it, and the lens dictates how the picture turns out.
I have to play devil's advocate for a second, though.
Go for it.
Is this just an incredibly elaborate gimmick to get out of writing a 300-page novel? I mean, placing all the creative responsibility on the reader feels a bit like throwing the steering wheel out the window, looking at the passenger and saying, "Good luck, you're the driver now."
I can see why it feels that way, but what's fascinating here is that the form is the content. By intentionally withholding the traditional narrative structure, meaning, there is no plot, there are no character arcs, there is no setting, the reader is forced into the act of what philosophers call hermeneutics.
Okay, I'm going to need a plain English translation of hermeneutics before we go any further.
Enough, yeah. Hermeneutics is basically the theory and methodology of interpretation. Think of it like reading a detective novel where the clues aren't in the story, but in the formatting choices on the page.
Oh, I see.
Because there is no fixed text to passively consume, your mind abhors the vacuum. It automatically starts building a narrative to fill the void. The gimmick, if we want to use that word, is actually a highly efficient mechanism to prove a philosophical point.
Which is that we're always doing the work.
Exactly. You, the reader, are always the one generating the meaning, even when you read a traditional novel. This text just makes that invisible process visible.
And if the reader is entirely responsible for building the narrative, they have to build it out of the blank spaces on the page. Let's look at how this index treats those blank spaces. Because the text argues nothingness isn't actually empty. In fact, nothing is a very busy place.
It is entirely generative. The entry for nothing in the index insists that nothingness actually possesses physical mass.
Yeah, there is a very specific, strange repetition in the text under this entry. It reads, the weight of nothing is 88, 88, 88. It repeats the number 88 3 times. Did the authors pull that number out of thin air, or is there a mechanism behind why nothing weighs exactly 88?
Well, while the text leaves it open to interpretation, the number 88 is famously the number of keys on a standard piano. Yeah. A piano contains the full spectrum of Western musical notes. Even when it sits completely unplayed in an empty room, that instrument holds the total potential for every song ever written. The 88 represents the heavy, vibrating potential of silence before a single key is struck.
Okay, to give a real-world physical analogy for that kind of heavy silence, think about the acoustic pressure in your ears in the moments immediately after a loud rock concert ends.
That's a great example.
Right. The music stops, but the silence isn't peaceful. It has a physical presence. It rings. The absence of the noise is almost louder, or at least heavier, than the noise itself was.
And this raises an important question about how we perceive emptiness in our daily lives.
Yeah.
We're socially conditioned to see absence as a void, a lack of something, like a failure of presence.
Yeah, exactly.
But the text flips this and treats absence as a shaped silence. It's a container full of potential that actually defines the space around it.
And it connects this shaped silence to the philosopher Ludwig Wittgenstein. The source references his famous Proposition 7, which states, whereof one cannot speak, thereof one must be silent. Wait, so Wittgenstein is basically saying language has a hard, absolute limit, and this index is trying to map the silence just past that limit.
That is the exact mechanism at play, yeah. The index subverts Wittgenstein beautifully. It essentially argues that where one cannot speak, one writes an index and lets the silence speak for itself.
Wow.
And the architecture of that silence in the text is incredibly detailed. The source outlines 7 distinct grammatical forms of silence.
How does silence have grammar? If you aren't saying anything, there are no rules to break.
Well, a grammar of silence means there are underlying rules and structures to what isn't being said. The shape of the silence changes based on the context.
Okay, like what?
For example, the text mentions the silence of assent. That comfortable, mutual quiet shared between 2 old friends on a road trip. That is structurally completely different from the silence of refusal. Think of a teenager stubbornly staring down a parent, refusing to answer a question.
Right, one is relaxed and the other is very tense.
Exactly. There is also the silence of the completed, like the heavy quiet of closing the back cover of a deeply moving book. The text actually connects this structural silence to the musical rest.
Like in sheet music.
Yeah. Consider the composer John Cage in his famous piece, 4 minutes, 33 seconds, which is literally 4 minutes and 33 seconds of musicians sitting on stage not playing their instruments.
I've heard of that. People usually laugh about it.
Right, but the rest isn't an interruption of the music. The coughing in the audience, the uncomfortable shuffling of feet, the ambient noise of the room, that becomes the composition. The silence is what gives the eventual sound its meaning.
Okay, so if an index organizes all these words and silences alphabetically, our brains are constantly trying to organize our own human experiences in a similar way. But the text quickly points out that human consciousness completely rejects anything resembling an alphabetical or linear filing system.
Totally. Memory actively rebels against chronological order. The text explains that the human brain does not file memories by date or by logical sequence.
It's just so true.
Instead, it files them by emotional charge. A memory might be cataloged under a specific scent, like wet asphalt after rain, or the exact quality of amber light coming through a kitchen window at 4 in the afternoon in late October.
My absolute favorite entry regarding this chaotic filing system is what the index calls the anthropology of Tuesday.
Oh, that's such a good point.
It's amazing. The text notes that grief is often much worse on a random, ordinary Tuesday. than it is on a highly anticipated significant date, like an anniversary or a birthday. And the reason is devastatingly simple. You prepare for an anniversary, you put up emotional armor, but an ordinary Tuesday does not have the capacity to accommodate the sudden, massive weight of a loss.
It just hits you.
Right. Tuesday just is. It's not performing like a weekend. It catches you completely off guard.
And while memory is doing this unpredictable filing in the background, there is also the foreground problem of what the text calls the embarrassment of consciousness.
Uh-oh.
This is the infinite regress of the human mind being aware of itself. It is the mind seeing itself being seen.
The permanent state of philosophical discomfort. I can translate this one perfectly.
Let's hear it.
It's that agonizing feeling when you are walking down the sidewalk and you see a large group of people walking toward you, and suddenly you become hyper-aware of your own body.
Oh, no. Yeah.
You start thinking, how do my arms swing when I walk? Am I swinging them too much? Not enough? Do I look like a robot? You can't just walk anymore because you were trapped in the loop of your own awareness.
That is the perfect mundane example of a massive philosophical concept. You cannot escape the aperture of your own observation. And meanwhile, time is operating as what the text calls the only honest thief.
The honest.
It steals the present moment constantly, relentlessly moving us forward, but it perfectly preserves the past in these little fragmented files.
Here's where it gets really interesting. If our memory only files things by emotional spikes, by the smell of wet asphalt and the vulnerability of a Tuesday afternoon, aren't we basically walking around with wildly inaccurate indexes of our own lives?
From a purely objective, factual standpoint, yes, absolutely. But the text makes a crucial argument here. Accuracy is actually the enemy of emotional truth. Yeah, memory is not a hard drive. It is not a passive retrieval system. Memory is a creative act of reconstruction. Every single time you open a memory file, you rewrite it slightly based on who you are in that current moment.
So the inaccuracy is actually a feature of being human, not a bug in the software.
Precisely. If we look at how this applies to our daily emotional lives, the text suggests that nostalgia, that deep, aching longing for the past, is very rarely about missing the actual historical events. You aren't usually missing the specific party or the specific apartment. Nostalgia is usually a longing for the self you were in the past. It is a homesickness for a version of your own consciousness that the honest thief of time has stolen.
That is incredibly heavy. But it makes perfect sense when you transition to how this index attempts the impossible, using strict logic to quantify the two most illogical, unquantifiable human experiences, love and grief.
Yeah, the big ones.
Because if memory catalogs our emotional states, love and grief are going to take up the majority of the page numbers in our files.
And the text attempts to apply rigid arithmetic to these abstract concepts, knowing full well the math will fail. But the specific way the math fails reveals the emotional truth.
How does it do that?
Well, it explores the mathematics of love, pointing out that in love, the equation 1 + 1 does not equal 2.
Right, because that would just be two separate people standing next to each other.
Exactly. The joining of two lives creates a third, entirely new entity that breaks the equal sign. Furthermore, love isn't described as a static noun you can put on a shelf. It is an active verb. The text defines it specifically as a decision to keep attending.
I love that. It's the decision to keep listening to your partner tell that same anecdote for the 100th time at a dinner party, and still choosing to be fully present for it, past the point where attention is easy or novel.
Yes. And then the text contrasts that with the mathematics of grief. This is arguably the most profound mechanism in the entire source.
It really is.
The text asserts, loss does not subtract, it divides. Everything is seen through it. Everything after is a fraction of itself.
I honestly had to stop and sit with that distinction for a minute. We always talk about loss as subtraction. You know, something is physically taken away from your life and you are left with less.
Right.
But division changes the fundamental mathematical nature of the whole.
It really does.
Yeah.
So what does this all mean for the person experiencing it?
To use a visual analogy, subtraction would be taking a piece of art off the wall of a room. The room is mostly the same, just missing an object. Division, the way the index describes grief, is like putting a permanent colored tint on the only window in that room.
Oh, that's good.
You haven't removed anything from the room itself, but every single ray of light that ever enters that space for the rest of your life will forever look different. The room is fundamentally, irrevocably altered.
Because the room is permanently altered, the text notes the beautiful, haunting idea that love makes ghosts. The loved person haunts the architecture of the space. Greece is then defined simply and perfectly as the love that has nowhere to go. It is all that accumulated potential, all that active attending, suddenly stripped of its physical destination.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, these mathematical metaphors, the division, the fractions, the equations of 1 plus 1, they all highlight the ultimate failure of language.
You do. Language simply cannot hold the volume of grief. It cannot contain the mechanism of love.
It just breaks down.
Exactly. The entire index, from the grammar of silence to the anthropology of Tuesday, serves as what the authors call an epiphany machine.
An epiphany machine.
Yes. It takes the incredibly strict, rigid, alphabetized categorization of a standard index and uses that rigid structure to point directly at the wild, untranslatable reality of the human soul. It has to categorize the silence, because the silence is the only container big enough to hold the actual truth.
Which brings this whole philosophical labyrinth right back out to your immediate reality. The person listening to this right now, you.
The text asserts, drawing on the philosophy of Simone Weil, that attention is the primary moral act. By offering your focus, by attending to this text, and by attending to this deep dive, you have been actively performing a moral act.
The final note from the author of the index says the author is you reading. And when you think about the mechanics of what we've just done, it's absolutely true.
It really is.
Just by having this conversation, just by you listening and processing these ideas about heavy silence, unpredictable Tuesdays, reconstructive memory, and window tints, we have all just built a book together. The book wasn't physically in the source material. It was being written in your head this entire time.
And knowledge is only truly valuable when it is understood and applied to your own experience. We've thrown a lot of complex, heavy concepts into the air today. The physical shape of absence, the division of grief, the aperture of the self. So I want to pose this directly to the listener.
Go ahead.
What stands out to you in all this? What specific piece of this invisible book resonated with your own mental filing system, and which page are you going to keep?
And to add to that, I want to leave you with one final lingering thought to mull over. We've talked about how memory files our lives not by grand historical events, but by the texture of a random Tuesday, or the quality of the autumn light. So if the comprehensive index of your own life was magically printed out and handed to you right now, what seemingly mundane word, what small object, or what perfectly ordinary Tuesday would secretly have the most page numbers listed next to it? And more importantly, who's the person you trust enough to let them read it?
That's a huge question.
Because at the end of the day, you are the one holding the map.
Yeah.
And the territory is just waiting for you to take a step.